So I'm going live right now. You're on, Charles.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our, well, there we are, extra drama. Yeah, welcome to our little live cast here. Yeah, can't you hear me? Ooh.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, now I need to turn off my my YouTube sound because I'm hearing myself here, which is not always as entertaining as you'd think. So let me just, there we are. Okay, so yes, welcome everybody. Really happy to be here again. And thank you, Patsy, for setting this all up. We're going to, people sent in questions and I'm just gonna bring them on and respond in person because I always get a lot more information from actually seeing somebody's face and hearing their voice than I do from simply the written words. Just wondering if, Patsy, do you want to, did you want to give any logistics or anything like that? Or should I just launch into it?
So I just want to thank everybody and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank our facilitator on the live chat. They're there to greet everybody. So please feel free to ask them questions and interact with them. And if you post any question in the live chat that we didn't get to it, with your permission, we would like to repost your questions in our community for, to get the energy and conversation going with your contribution of your questions. And thank you and have fun.
All right. Thanks, Patsy. Yeah, so obviously since the last time we did this, it's been about a month, I think. It's been quite a wild ride. I know that I'm talking about our society, I'm talking about our planet, I'm talking about me, and probably talking about a lot of you, where I sometimes visit a lot of pretty deep despair and then come back to myself or come back to a truth that had been lost, thanks to the other people who are holding that truth when I'm maybe not able to hold it. So and this happens in direct ways, somebody reaches out at the right moment. And also I think happens indirectly, just everybody holding the field of possibility for a future that sometimes seems impossible when you read the news. So yeah, maybe I'll just start with pointing to the presence of all of that I've just said, maybe inside of each person here. And yeah, I'm inviting everybody to notice the holograph of the ups and downs, the deep despair, the wild hope, the calm knowing. And with that, let's dive right in. Maybe we start with, I don't know, Laura Fraser, is she here?
Yes, she is. Just a second. Laura. Sorry, she was here before.
Also, maybe while we're seeing if we can find her, I'll just say that I just published a new essay. Probably a lot of you have seen it. I haven't actually announced it yet. It's about QAnon, called QAnon, from QAnon's Dark Mirror, Hope. And I wrestled with this thing for like 6 weeks before, I mean, totally abandoned it, came back to it, partly because it originally wasn't coming from a place where I can really speak clearly and truthfully. It was coming from a place of a lot of defensiveness, where I was getting called out and canceled, from events and associated through this chain of associations with Donald Trump. Well, I've been on this podcast with that person, and they've been on this, and that person just supports that, and pretty soon, like I'm on Team Evil. So I was like, oh yeah, well, actually, I'm not on Team Evil. I'm good. See, so I had to resist actually, kind of joining the playground bullies, and establishing myself as someone who isn't going to be bullied by bullying others, and to really hold a place of peaceful, like a willingness to peacefully look at where everybody is coming from in this really venomous political debate. So anyway, did you find Laura, or should we move on to another one?
Laura dropped. She came
Okay.
from, her connection was from UK, so maybe.
Okay. Well, maybe she'll come back. So I really liked your question, but maybe we just move on to the next one.
Do you want me
Kathy Dixon, is Kathy here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Catherine. Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you for the chance to ask my question. So I've been a big fan for a long time and really appreciate your contributions to this world and my life. And a big part of my experience is around experiencing, that my experience of the world is a projection rather than some extrinsic reality. That, not that there isn't an extrinsic reality, but more that my experience of the world is my own creation. And I don't hear you referring to that much directly. And so I'm just really curious, Charles, what is your experience of projection and how that impacts us? Because like with this pandemic and things, it's so easy to be polarizing and not recognize the part of me that's terrified, or the part of me that wants to control, or what have you. And so to me, I mean, it just seems really integral that I own my own confusion before I try to do, not that I'm complacent in the world, but a clear mind can serve more effectively. Yeah. And understanding projection, I think, is part of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. So yeah, let's, okay. So, yeah, I think what you're reaching for something really important, which is personal responsibility in the events that we're seeing in the world. You could go to some metaphysical level and say that in some way that my personal beliefs or my state of being is influencing or determining the reality feed that I'm getting from the world, or even changing reality itself. Or you could say, well, the way that I interpret and first the way that I select what information comes in and the way I interpret that information generates an experiential reality that then conforms to a state of being. So like there's definitely truth in that. And there's also truth in reality is a lot bigger than we are. And whatever is being, even if you say, yeah, like there's a projection of the internal onto the external. We also have to understand that whatever is being projected is not always something that we're conscious of. In fact, usually it's something that we're unconscious of. And in fact, because all kinds of surprising things happen. like sometimes people who are
Mhm.
confirmed skeptics, a UFO shows up in their backyard or something like that, or some visitation of grace comes into their lives and delivers them from despair. So I guess for me, it's to understand that um, it's to navigate this paradox between taking responsibility for my responses and for my life, and not falling into victimhood, but also not thinking that I'm in control of everything, and to be humble in front of these experiences. Otherwise, like, I mean, so one way that this projection can happen, it's not necessarily, so say there's a pandemic, or say that you are uh, locked down, or even put in prison or something like that. That doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, I'm being shown the part of me that is in prison. I'm my inner squalor is manifesting as external squalor. My inner persecution is manifesting as external persecution. It also could be that the soul is engineering an opportunity to discover even greater freedom that's not dependent on certain external circumstances. So
Mhm.
yeah, the relationship between the inner and the outer is really mysterious. Um, and I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that. I sense that I haven't said anything that you don't already know very well. Is there an edge, maybe, Catherine, that you want to push to?
Just, I guess, yeah. No,
No. Okay.
I think, yeah,
All right.
that'll do.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
It just feels important to recognize for me, and I can't speak for anyone else. It just feels really important for me to recognize my piece in my creation of my experience. And it doesn't mean that I create what happens, but I create my experience of what happens. And
Yeah.
until I own that, I'm, in the throes of chaos,
Yeah. Or another way to do it also, which maybe comes down to the same thing, that is in new circumstances, I like to look at what new information does this show me about myself?
Mhm.
Because unless I've been in those circumstances, I don't really know who I am. I only know who I am in familiar circumstances. But probably everybody here has the experience of, say, you're grown up and you go and visit your parents, and a part of you that was long dormant maybe comes out in your relationship to your parents when you stay at their house for a week, or your children when you stay at their house for a week. So here we are, everybody in a situation with COVID-19, or many of us at least, in a situation where we have not been before. Um, or this is in general true when we're in the midst of tumultuous events. Like, who are you in new circumstances? What does it stir up? How do you feel? Um, what is being shown that you didn't know was there? Because that is an opportunity then to integrate that part, or to heal that part, or to develop that part. I mean, maybe you discover a new calling through
Sure.
new circumstances. So even if you don't subscribe to the metaphysical view that your internal hidden conditions are generating the reality necessary for them to manifest, for them to appear to you, to be expressed, still we can use we can follow kind of the same logic in um, the path of self-development, using the gift of changing circumstances. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on now to uh, the next person. Um,
Would you like Laura is here. Would you
Yeah,
like?
yeah, let's go. Let's have Laura.
Hello.
Hi, Laura.
Laura, where's your video?
Hi.
Okay.
Oh no. Wait, I'm gonna.
Well, Laura has no video.
That's okay. We can hear her instead.
Okay. Seems like she just left again.
Oh,
Are you there, Laura?
no, there she's there.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi, Laura.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, yeah. You want to ask a
Hi.
question?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Charles. Hi, Patsy.
Hi.
Sorry, I didn't have a question that I wrote to hand. I remember, so I can rephrase it because I've been
That's
thinking
cool.
about it. If that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
So the quote that you shared, there's a piece that the part that particularly speaks to me, two parts, and I can see how motivated I am by guilt and the sense of needing to justify my existence. And yet in my heart is a very deep wish to serve in a specific area. And I wondered if you could speak. I think in my question I asked, how does one get through, someday, how do you, Charles, how do you look of coins before, how in my being can I calm the part of me that I have such a deep wish, and I also have so many, big ego, big distractions, but this big frenzy to prove my existence, and the guilt part is huge. So I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. I found your question here, and I'll read the quote you were referring to because it is powerful. It is, "One day you will serve others, not out of self-interest or guilt or social conscience, but because there is nothing else you would rather do. It will feel as simple and pleasurable as seeing a wonderful film that makes you happy and wanting to share it with others." So that's the quote that you built your question around. And yeah, it definitely has the ring of truth, doesn't it? And then you're saying, but yeah, like I hear that, and I'm still sometimes caught up in people pleasing, caught up in ego, caught up in these other motivations. So and then you asked me, how do I refine and clarify my service? Like, what do I do about letting go of all these other motivations? So to answer that, I would actually just go right back to the quote and really put the emphasis on one little part of it. One day you will serve others. It is a prophecy. You will serve others, not out of self-interest or guilt, et cetera, et cetera. It's not actually exhorting you to work toward that, but it's making a prediction. It's not something that you have to strive for. And in fact, the striving is coming out of the same kind of guilt, social conscience, et cetera, et cetera. And this quote is saying, you don't need to do this. It doesn't have to be that hard. And it isn't that hard. But so then the question is, okay, well, what is the process by which I will come to that level of peacefulness and that level of ease and that level of spontaneity and that level of alignment with the life force flowing through me that naturally seeks to serve others and the world and to make the world more beautiful? Like, what is the process to come into that alignment? And it's a process of healing. It's the process of healing the very wounds that that appear to you in your experience as the people pleasing, as the guilt, and so forth. So Yeah. So for example, you mentioned also in the written question, a part of me that gets so disheartened and broken by not being seen. I think a lot of us know exactly what you're talking about. This has been especially true for women in this society, but also true for anybody who holds um, a strong dissenting view or violates social norms. Like either you're not seen or you are seen, and that's even worse because then you're ridiculed or dismissed. So this need to be seen, it's not like a pathology. We all have a genuine need to be seen. It's just that if we want to be effective in serving, then there's like a clarification that needs to happen between what am I doing in order to meet this need to be seen and what am I doing in order to serve others? Because maybe one way to try to meet that need is to display acceptable attitudes, or at least acceptable to some in-group. And then you're going to be seen, you're going to be approved of. But in fact, that doesn't meet the real need because that approval is conditional. And that seeing is not really seeing you for who you are, it's seeing you for a show that you're putting on. A lot of people who grew up not being fully seen, maybe by their parents, by their teachers, by society, and were only validated and acknowledged by putting on the show of being a good girl or being a smart boy or being right, being acceptable, then you become very good at putting on the show, but never actually get seen past the show, leaving someone lonely and unseen, even if they appear to be quite visible and quite respected. So as long as that wound is operating, then we're never going to be at full effectiveness or full ease in serving the world. And the answer is like, yeah, first stop repudiating that need to be seen and embrace it. And then once you embrace that need, you will be more open to actually being seen. Because if the habit has been to put on a show of good girl to be seen, sometimes that's a hard habit to break. And it's really scary to be seen for real. But that's what the soul is calling for. It's really what it's calling for is authentic relationship. So, this sounds like a big healing, and it is, but it's not all or nothing. It's not like you'll never do anything good in the world until you're finally fully seen by a community. But it's that once this desire becomes known and embraced and accepted, then a process will be set in motion where you will have opportunities to be seen more and more and more. And as you are seen more and more, you'll move more toward the ease and the naturalness described in that quotation of it will be so simple and pleasurable to serve the world, just like sharing a film that made you happy. So yeah, I hope that's sheds a little light on it. And maybe I'll just say, just ask for that kind of gentleness towards ourselves and each other, that we all carry these unmet needs that are unmet because of the society that we grew up in. Yeah, so thank you so much, Laura, for bringing that up. And maybe
Thank you so much, Charles.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So yeah, let's then move to I really liked Justin Kelly's question, but I don't think he's here. Is he, Patsy?
No, he isn't. He declined to be on screen.
Okay. Okay. I hope it's okay if I assume that since he sent it in, it's okay for me to read it. It's not.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So he says, I'm the father of an almost 3-year-old boy. With the blessings of the universe, my wife will birth our second child sometime in June next year. In many ways, my heart sees the goodness of the world, and I'm able to introduce this to my son. In another regard, I'm terrified. The isolation and fear that is dominating our world is overwhelming. I know my son feels it. He is naturally gregarious and engaging. I can't count the number of times I've had to say, give them space, honey, as he tries to engage with another child. This doesn't arise from my desire for space. I actually feel okay with the associated risks. However, my peers are often much more fearful, and I want to respect their wishes as parents. So what's my question? I don't know really, except to say, please help. How can we best show up as parents during these deeply unsettling times? Yeah, I mean, that question really hits me hard, because uh, I have sons as well. I have my youngest is 7 right now. I have a 15-year-old and 2 older boys. And sometimes I'm almost apologetic, like, wow, what kind of world did I bring you into? My 15-year-old's camp, his awesome summer camp, that was like one of the best things in his life. It was canceled this year, and now it looks like it's going to be permanently canceled. And he, hardly has opportunities to interact with peers. And he's supposed to be happy schooling online in front of a screen all the time, where socializing, recreation, leisure, education, all of it is in front of a screen. Like, what kind of world is that? And this world where it's not okay to touch each other, not okay to be too close to each other. I mean, I have these, and yeah, I understand the rationale for these measures of distancing and separation and isolation. Um, and I'm not going to go into right now the extent to which these measures are justified, but whether they are justified or not, I feel pretty sad that, and I'll say just a little bit, like this, the distancing and the isolation and the mediation of relationships through computers. This is not a new trend that just started in 2019 or 2020 with COVID. This is the trend of many decades. And, ultimately, and I know people who are like, wow, I don't think I want to have children. I don't want to bring them into this world of lockdown. But, what I came to is I personally wasn't born just to survive life and uh, live in the optimum conditions. Like, I came here for a reason, and I have to believe that about my children too. That, and the more resource, the more nourishment, the more love that I give them, the more truth I'm able to hold with them, the more powerful they will be as beings who might actually help create a better world. Like, maybe they were born into this dark time for the same reason that all of us were, to help transform it. So then the question in parenting, like, for one thing, it's like the most important thing isn't to say, oh, don't complain about it, it's fine, it's, this is progress, this is good. And if you don't conform to it and like it, then you're a bad boy and I pathologize you, and you have a condition, you have attention deficit disorder, you have oppositional defiant disorder, you have a disorder, and we're going to medicate you, and we're going to make you into a good boy whether you like it or not. Like, that's the most important thing, is not to do that, and to actually acknowledge, yeah, this sucks. It's not supposed to be this way, and there's nothing wrong with your longing to go outside or your longing to have friends. Like, and also, you don't have to be a victim of that longing, of that unmet need, but to acknowledge it, like, otherwise you're gaslighting them and you're going to turn them on themselves. So we can still be present with them in that pain, in that longing, and hold them as the brave and amazing divine being that they are, that they won't be limited by that, and that ultimately uh, any deprivation can become a source of strength. So it's not easy, but for me, when I look at Carrie, he's 7. Um, I go to, how can I be the ally of this being in doing good and beautiful work in the world in his lifetime? And I'm not like laying that on him as like this, big responsibility, but it's more of creating the conditions of soul that will allow him to do that. So I hope this helps, um, uh, Justin. And yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I'm sure a lot of people have had similar thoughts. So really appreciate that. And shall we move on to David, if he's still here?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Can you see me? Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Charles. I appreciate you taking my question. And man, you've just been like such a light in the fog for me and other folks that I know for years now with your essays and things of that nature. So I just really appreciate you, and I wanted to put that out there to you while I'm sort of looking at your face.
Thanks.
So kind of taking from your quote, there was a little piece about the daily arena of life. And gosh, in your intro, you mentioned a little bit that you have your darker times and things of that nature. And I'm really feeling as though the arena of life is kind of kicking my ass these days. And I'm sure I really appreciated the other questions. I can see that's happening to a lot of other folks too, and that makes me feel not so alone in that. So I see that you're in New England, and I'm also in New England. I'm not from here, and I don't have any family here, and I found that in these current times to be kind of difficult. And I wonder if you have felt as though you've kind of found some tribe here on the ground, as it were, and if the beginning of this new and ancient story community has been part of your reaching out to people to maybe try to find more of that for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I'm actually a fairly newcomer to New England as well. My wife, Stella, grew up here, and that's why we moved here. We have, Carrie has a cousin who he's playing with right now, actually. And we've been here for a couple of years now, and we're starting to develop, some community of people. Like, this is what's been amazing with COVID is that, like, people I would have thought are highly aligned with my values and way of life turned out not to be. And people that I would not have suspected of sharing some of my values, when it actually comes to putting them into action, turn out to be much more compatible than I would have known. So this has been a bit of a recalibration. So yeah, we're starting to develop like a small pod of people who, shall we say, are willing to think independently and are less hypnotized by the dominant stories and willing to live in a less fearful way. But I wouldn't call it tribe at this point. It's like pulling together some scattered pieces. Maybe in 20 years, it'll be tribe. Maybe in my kids' generation, it'll turn into tribe.
Yeah.
Got a long way to go.
Yeah. And that kind of, I'll try not to go on too long here, but that kind of goes into another part of a question I had, which was, I really share a lot of your vision for the more beautiful world. And but in that place of getting overwhelmed currently, I wonder what your thoughts would be about where you think we may be headed in the short term. If you think that we may be headed for a more difficult situation, possibly in the short term, before we get over that hump, maybe into some type of renaissance. I guess I feel as though, from my studies of history, that in times like these, that's often where we end up first, is in a time of great upheaval and struggle.
Yeah. All signs right now that I'm looking at are pointing toward a future of totalitarian corporatism, and a surveillance state, and a medical security state, with intensifying control over every aspect of life and over information. That's what it looks like. However, there are variables that prognostication does not take into account. And the variables start with ourselves. Like, anytime you predict the future, you're leaving something out. You're leaving out the effect of our choices right now.
Yeah.
And these choices could be a lot more powerful than the rational mind can understand, especially when our choices align us with creative powers beyond our understanding. Stella and I just watched a documentary a couple nights ago called The Phenomenon. It's about UFOs,
Okay.
and like all this entire theory that's been derided as the province of cranks, crackpots, and conspiracy theorists since the 1940s. Now, like, the government's like, oh yeah, actually, that was all true. Actually, we have been sighting UFOs. It wasn't swamp gas. It wasn't weather balloons, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm waiting for them to say, sorry for gaslighting you. Sorry for destroying people's careers. Sorry for ridiculing people who had authentic experiences. I haven't heard that apology yet.
Right.
But this is just one example of a much bigger reality that is pounding at the door right now. And if we do not let that in, we're going to be in despair. Without some larger understanding of reality and possibility, then yeah, there is no rational reason to think that we're not going to enter a dark age that will never end. Like, I don't see any reason why it would end. I mean, these trends have not abated toward domination, control, surveillance, etc. Like, what vain fantasy would have them end of their own accord? For them to end, we have to become different. We have to choose differently. And the basis of that choice is an expanded palette of information, of paints that we use to paint the world, that we use to design, to create the world. Yeah. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. And shall we?
Do you mind if I just can I?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can I tape onto that just really quickly? So that's really kind of the last part of what I had written to you, was that, do you feel, and I feel like you started to extrapolate out into that a little bit. Do you feel as though there are certain ways in which we can help to try and change that outcome, from the usual path that this would, from the usual historical path that these actions would usually lead us down? What are your suggestions as to some ways that we could try to move forward in a different way for a different outcome?
Oh, it comes down to, that's why I wrote that article on QAnon. It comes down to compassion. It comes down to piercing the barriers that are keeping everybody separate, that
Yeah.
are keeping society divided into two opposing tug of war teams, where each side struggles mightily to move that marker in the center of the rope a little bit toward their side, and the other side's pulling harder to move it toward their side. And what really needs to happen is that everybody has to let go of the rope, or, once everybody lets go of the rope, it's going to be easy to move that marker. What we need is unity right now. Not that there are not valid disagreements, but most of our opposition is based on us versus them thinking. That is an ideology. It's based on projection onto the other. It's based on dehumanizing other people. And it ultimately comes, well, I won't say it comes from, but it is caused by, and it causes self-rejection. Anyway, I have some of that in the essay, and I don't want to go fully into that right now, but
yeah, thanks for mentioning the essay. I meant to tell everybody I'm almost finished up with that, and it's it's really powerful. I'd encourage everybody to read that, and thanks for that essay.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for your answer. Thanks for
yeah, thanks, David.
Appreciate it.
So let's see here. Okay, do we have Michelle here?
Yes, Michelle Haley, right?
Michelle Hanley, yeah.
Hanley, okay. Here we go.
Hi, Charles.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you for taking my question. And thank you. I think the world is a much more beautiful place because of you and what you do. So my question is, when you suggest to try on the lens of someone else to see what may be revealed or concealed, what anchors you to you? When identity is still being explored and maybe is not, and it's still not as fluid, how does one not get lost in this process?
That's a great question. I'm my next essay, or maybe another one I'm working on, in my mind at least, is about sense making, and because like, so you're talking about my suggestion, like go into the territory of those who disagree with you. If you believe what the CDC is telling you, then actually like watch the movie Vaxxed, and those films, and really go into that world, and don't just accept the cartoon version of that the mainstream is presenting you. And if you're in that world, really read some papers on virology, like really go into the best that the mainstream has to offer. Because, and these sincere, intelligent scientists, like visit the other camp. If you're a Democrat and maybe you like look at some of the stuff about election fraud, and really go into that world. And if you're already in that world, like, have you actually like read the rebuttals of those claims? Like, so to visit the other world, and your question is, well, okay, how do you not just get lost in that world? Like, what can you anchor? You've used the word anchor. Like, what can anchor you into reality when there's this story, there's that story, there's another story? Like, how do you know? So part of this, so there's two things. One is that what I do, at least, is I'll go into these different narratives, these different mythologies, these different realities, and I pay attention to who do I become in those? How do I feel? Is this really me? Because a belief is not just a disembodied intellectual construct. It corresponds to a state of being. So for example, if I go into the, like some of these deep conspiracy realities, these mythologies, at first I feel like kind of energized and validated, and yeah, everything is wrong. But then I start to feel like this that I'm in this exclusive class of the truth tellers, the truth seekers. Like there's a kind of a superiority complex in it, where we're the ones who are in the know, that I feel a little uncomfortable with. And so, and also like, I have to see an awful lot of people as just pure evil to administer this this conspiracy. And so I'm like, okay, that's how I like. I feel a number of things, and also I tend to feel paralyzed if I go into those mythologies, because these super powerful controllers are controlling everything, like, and and they have pretty much superhuman organization, discipline, and technology, and unlimited amounts of money. So that feeling of powerlessness. So it really comes down to trusting my feelings and to trusting my direct experiences. So like I'll go into the conventional medical mythology where I mean, try it. Look up homeopathy on Wikipedia. It'll say in the introductory part that it's quackery and pseudoscience. And there's no scientific basis that it could possibly happen, and so forth. And like I can go into those realities, but and this has happened to me before, where I'm like, oh my God, maybe I'm wrong about everything. Maybe my whole career has been has been gumming up the gears of progress and civilization. But then I'm like, hold on here. Like I've had direct experiences that contradict this mythology. Like I've experienced things, and am I supposed to not believe what I actually experienced? And to put myself in the same category that mythology puts people in: the quacks, the hoaxers, the dupes, the frauds, the fuzzy thinkers, the hysterical people who think that they've had some kind of healing experience, but actually they are just, hysterical, like wishful thinking, or even lying, like, am I going to do that to myself? Like that, again, is the very definition of gaslighting, that you make an appearance so convincing that you begin to doubt your own direct experience. So that's what I ultimately have to come back to every time. That's the anchor. It's my direct, because how can I really know anything else except through my body, except through my senses? And so like when it comes to like some of the conspiracy theories, basically they're saying that a human trafficking pedophilia elite is pulling all the strings of power in this world. And, that view is caricaturized and ridiculed by the mainstream media, even if it's mentioned at all. And like I said, like, so I can go to my body. How do I feel in that mythology? Okay, this isn't really me. I'm not a natural inhabitant of this mythology, but how do I feel in the mythology that completely ridicules it? I don't feel good there either. And I have direct experience knowing, not myself, thank God, but like I know people and know people who have worked with people who have, escaped from that world or had direct contact with that world. So I know that there's something there. Don't know how much, but again, so that comes down to a direct experience. Like one of the direct experiences is of somebody that you trust. And actually, there's another question on the queue that is about trust. So maybe I'll return to that later. Yeah, does that cover the bases, Michelle?
I think so. This question actually arose from the conversations with Orland, because I don't think I necessarily went in the same person as when I came back out because of this, trying on this new lens. So yes, I think this covers it.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Let's move on then to, let's see. Do you want to, maybe we'll skip to the trust question, Jessica, and then we'll go back to Catherine, if we can do that.
Okay. Hi. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. This is really, I appreciate it so much. And I think you might have partly answered it when you were answering Michelle's question, but I guess in my own experience, what I really notice is a tendency to want to kind of divide people into trustworthy, like fully trustworthy and fully untrustworthy. And I can see how that leads to a lot of heartbreak and disappointment. And, you know, someone fails me and moves over to the untrustworthy category. And yeah, and I guess I just wanted to know for you, because you do stand in a lot of different camps, and you mentioned like checking in with your body, but what's your process for kind of deciding like who you trust, what news sources you trust, and then how to keep that fluid and not drive yourself mad with the, like how long the process takes? Thanks.
Yeah. For me, this is really something that is in my body, because I can go through all kinds of mental calisthenics, all these mental contortions that about I should trust this person, and I have this reason to trust them and that reason to trust them, and I shouldn't trust that person because they said that. But actually, when I stop doing that, I notice whether I actually trust them or not. It's like I already either trust them or I don't trust them. It's not something that I have to decide. So like the whole question, how do I decide? Like, actually, I don't decide. Some people I just naturally would trust with my child, would trust with my life, meeting them only once. Other people, I just have a instinctive distrust. And by far the majority of people, I don't trust them or distrust them. I mean, I maybe trust them. I feel some trust, I feel some wariness. And over time, that can change. And it's not that I've gathered reasons to trust them. I might tell myself that I have reasons to trust them. I might use those to explain how it is that maybe I trust them. But it's not a mental process. So yeah, like what is it that allows, this is the biggest one, is what allows you to recognize sincerity. Now, maybe there are some people who can fake sincerity, but I think that to be fooled by somebody who's giving every appearance of being sincere, you have to actually be complicit in the deception on some level. They have to be hooking something in you that allows you to override your instincts. So the accuracy of the bullshit detector depends on clearing the instrument of the body, which again is a process of healing. Like a manipulative salesman, for example, is hooking unconscious unmet needs. And the more that those are healed, the less susceptible you'll be, even if you are naturally a very trusting person. And this is, like, I mean, ultimately, this just goes back to the previous question. I mean, there's so much information, like any story that any version of events, any narrative that you want to believe, you will be able to find the data to construct an argument for it. And you'll find somebody out there who has constructed that argument for you. And your Facebook argument becomes, oh yeah, well, watch this. Oh yeah, well, watch that. How are you ever, it's not like that you are smarter and better and more right than your opponent on Facebook. It's not that like half the population is smarter than the other half. and that society will improve when the smart ones defeat the dumb ones in an electoral contest. Sorry, that's just not the way it's going to happen. So like how will you ever navigate this the ever shifting whirlwind of information and stories? Like you cannot navigate the matrix from within the matrix, and what's outside of the matrix, it's physicality.
All right, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and let's see. I noticed there's also things in the chat, but let's go to Catherine first, and then maybe we'll also look at the chat on YouTube and see what else we might. So is Catherine still on?
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me to ask my question. It has to do a bit with our DNA and our inheritance as it lives in our bodies, which is a concept that Orland talks about a bit. And also the memory that lives in the earth. There's a portion of your conversation with Orland where you talk a lot about like memory and wisdom that is found in the earth. And so I'm interested in how we can heal and work towards healing by really coming to terms with what we have inherited in our DNA, which can be, there's, I don't necessarily want to judge like good or bad, but, just the truth of, our ancestry and our lineage personally, but then also obviously collectively. And so one of my questions, I had a couple parts to it, but one of them, I have it here. For many of us whose lineages have been uprooted from our ancestral lands by choice or by force, and then some of us may be living on our ancestral lands too, how do we reconcile being distant or living on lands where our DNA holds memory? So maybe we live somewhere where the land around us is not as connected with our DNA as perhaps another part of the world. But we are yet so connected, and the world and the earth also holds memory with us at the same time. And yeah, if there's, there's also other parts to my question, but you can kind of get where I'm going.
Right. So I once read an account. I don't know I can't remember if it was an anthropologist or somebody, but he was visiting a place on Earth where the indigenous people still lived in close relationship to the land, and he was driving in a Land Rover or something with a local person with him, and as they drove across the landscape, the local person was talking like nonstop as fast as he possibly could. And the guy's like, "Why are you talking so fast?" And he said, "Well, I have to talk when we're driving. I have to talk at that speed in order to speak the entire landscape." So his language was like the land was soaked in with his language. Everything that you talk about refers to a place that has a multidimensional connection to the speaker. By multidimensional, it means that maybe someone has a story associated with that place. Maybe your grandfather told you something about that place. Like so ordinarily, if you were walking through that landscape and you got to this, big old tree, you would tell the story about how your grandfather fell out of that tree when he was little. Like, so the land and the language are connected. And this connection, as you were saying, also enters the DNA, so that over time, a people become of a place. And that's what indigeneity actually is. It is to be of a place. The dissociation from the land can happen in a lot of ways. One, just through moving, being uprooted, emigrating. I mean, most emigration, happens out of desperation. Otherwise, and from disconnection. But it can also happen, like you can be disconnected from the land that you're on. If you spend all your time indoors and relate to the land only as scenery and not multidimensionally, not as a source of food and medicine, and not relating to it through all of the senses in the elements, using materials from the land, depending on the land, noticing over years, decades, or even generations, the effect of your choices on the land. Like that, if you don't have that, then you are also not of the land. So I think that the important thing in our time is how to get, it's to rebuild our indigeneity, which simply means coming into relationship with the places that we live in, and becoming of that land again. And that is how the spirits of the land enter our DNA. And this can happen not only over generations, but it can happen to a person in one lifetime. The DNA, I mean, part of it is just very mundane. Like if you are in the dirt outdoors, then bacteria and viruses are going to get into your body that will alter your DNA. This is part of the new biology that Lynn Margulis pioneered, that we're actually going back to Barbara McClintock, but the horizontal transfer of DNA from environment into the body and into the germline. So this is part of it is just very biological, but then there's also more esoteric levels of the ways in which the land becomes us. So, it's just a matter of taking the next step. And it's a baby step. For me, it's like having a garden, like just something that simple, and getting to know people who also have gardens, or who have a relationship to the land. I mean, even like Stella, who grew up here, we drive around and she has stories. Oh, that was so-and-so's house. Oh, I, kissed my first boy here or whatever. Like there's stories, or so-and-so, did such and such here. Like that's part of how place enters the body. And the more that our experience is mediated by technology and dissociated from place, the less chance there is for that to happen. Yeah. And of course, I mean, you can draw out the consequences of this, this separation, in the age of COVID distancing and lockdown. I mean, which is basically constraining us to live even more through the screen, and even less, now, like even when you go shopping, like that's a little bit of human interaction that now, at least for us, I mean, we pretty much order everything now, anyway, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Thanks. Yeah. Let me just look at the live chat here. Off to market, catch up later. Okay. Boy, a lot of interesting things here. The Great Reset, the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. Yeah, there was a question there about the Great Reset. That could mean a lot of things. And in a way, I think that the World Economic Forum and the financial elites are hijacking an archetype, because there's something that stirs in our hearts that's positive about a great reset. a wiping away of inequality and injustice and kind of starting again. Well, a real reset would involve a jubilee. I'm just going to make it really practical. A jubilee, a cancellation of debt in some form. And what they are talking about is pretty much the opposite of that. It is a destruction of small business, of economic autonomy, and a preservation of existing power relationships, and a removal of any democratic barrier to the further accumulation of wealth. That's how it looks to me anyway. So the way that the Great Reset, it stirs such a positive response, but it's being used as a cover for the perpetuation of a more intensified version of the status quo. So, yeah, and in order to maintain fantastic inequality, you have to be able to control the population, to quell dissent and to, keep people compliant. So I'm quite suspicious of the Great Reset as it is currently being used. So anyway, does any of the moderators here find anything? Gosh, so much here.
Yes, Charles.
Yes, Patsy.
It is a lot of very, very wonderful questions, but it is over time, and I want to be conscientious about people's time. So should I pose these questions in question for Charles in NAS so he can respond there if you want?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, those of you who are just watching on YouTube or whatever, and who aren't in our online community, which I host, then it's called New and Ancient Story. You can find it on my website, and yeah, lots of lively conversation there. So yeah, let's do that. I'll try to check into the questions on NAS. Yeah, thanks, Patsy, for keeping an eye on the time. Yeah. Anything on your mind you want to bring in just at the end?
Well, I would like to read people a quote that I personally love and I meditate on just about every day nowadays. Is from Mr. Roger. He says, "It is our job to encourage each other to discover that uniqueness and to provide ways of developing its expression in service to our fellow human beings. Those of us who have this particular vision must continue against all odds. Life is for service."
Wow.
And I want to
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Patsy. And thank you, Mr. Rogers. One of the great saints of the 20th century. So yeah, with that, I'll bid you all farewell, and we'll do this again sometime, I guess. If there's a call for it, we'll do it again. So thank you, and have a great rest of your Sunday.